Zimbabwean President Robert Mugabe relents to immense pressure and resigns. The challenges and progress in defeating sanitation-related disease in Africa. And a top Ugandan musician turned legislator wants to use his star power to ignite political change. Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening and welcome. I'm Vincent Makori. This is Africa 54. We begin tonight with the breaking news that Zimbabwean President Robert Mugabe has resigned, according to the Speaker of the nation's parliament. Under immense pressure from lawmakers, including members of his own ruling ZANU-PF party, Mugabe, the world's oldest leader, is finally stepping down after 37 years in power. Speaker Jacob Mudenda read out what he said was a letter from Mugabe, which read, I, Robert Gabriel Mugabe, in terms of Sections 96 of the Constitution of Zimbabwe, hereby formally tender my resignation with immediate effect. Longtime opposition leader Morgan Tsvangirai is calling for the country to unite.
My call, ZANU-PF, MDC and everyone, is that it's now time to put our heads together the sound, so that we build a Zimbabwe that we can all respect, that we can all admire. Never again should we have a process where the people have to take up arms against their own government.
Former Vice President Emmerson Mnangagwa says he will not return to Zimbabwe until he can be assured of his personal safety. Now, for more on Mugabe's resignation, I'm joined by two VOA journalists, Nike Ching, VOA's State Department correspondent, and Zulu Blessing, VOA Zimbabwe reporter. Welcome to both of you. Now, I want to start with you, Nike. You know, resignation, this is big news. Everybody's going to remember where they were on this day. But the United States also has a position regarding Zimbabwe. Just yesterday, the acting Assistant Secretary of State, Don Yamamoto, had a roundtable and talked about what the U.S. would like to see in the future of Zimbabwe after Mugabe. What did he say?
The latest development that the resign of Mugabe definitely is a positive development. Before Secretary Tillerson is going to visit Africa next year, early next year. So acting Assistant Secretary of State Yamamoto, he told a small group of roundtable, what the United States want to see is a real, genuine transition to democracy and a real political and economic reform. And so, as we understand, the meeting, the gathering of Southern African development community leaders are gathering today. And then one of the messages that the United States want to convey is, the international community want to lift the sanctions. But before we can do that, is the political reform and a genuine transition to democracy.
Now, Blessing, we were going to talk about the impeachment process. We were caught off guard.
Indeed.
Did you see this coming, the resignation of Mugabe?
I think I saw it coming simply because I think those who wanted Mr. Mugabe to step down were using a lot of tactics to force him to step down. Of course, first there was the military intervention. He did not step down, and then the party recalled him. Still, he was defiant. And I think the impeachment now, I think he noted that, and also in the morning he had called for a cabinet, and only 4 ministers attended, close relatives of his. So I think he saw the writing on the wall. And then with the impeachment, I think he also saw that, the MPs had numbers because Mr. Morgan Tsvangirai's MDC, the opposition party, had said that it was going to work with ZANU-PF to impeach President Robert Mugabe. So I think, this was just going to be humiliating for him.
Yeah, so rather resign than be kicked out. But talk about the celebrations, the jubilation that I've seen on the streets of Harare. There was an illusion, or was it, that Mugabe is a popular guy? What we are witnessing, what does it tell us about the people of Zimbabwe and their love for Mugabe?
I think celebrations in Harare are not surprising because that is an opposition stronghold. Mr. Mugabe derives his support from the rural areas, and you know, but because of the economic crisis, I think this is Mr. Mugabe's greatest undoing. He could not resolve the economic crisis. It was worsening, you know, and Zimbabwe, according to many economists, was back to the hyperinflation years of 2008. So, you know, Americans would say, is the economy stupid?
Yes. And talk about the economy, Nike. Ambassador Yamamoto did talk about the prospects of lifting sanctions. So what will it take for whoever is going to form the next government to have all the sanctions, or at least meaningful sanctions, lifted from Zimbabwe?
Right. So a question was asked yesterday during the roundtable, like, would the alternative be a better one, like Mugabe himself? Will his successor be a better governor, a leader for the country? So he answered that it's up for the people of Zimbabwe to decide. And then now we're talking about sanctions. Now we know the economy has been declined for years in Zimbabwe. And then, so quote his word, unacceptable, because Zimbabwe used to be, in his word, the bread basket in Africa, and now during the years of decline, it's unacceptable. So what you need to do is to really implement the rule of due process, economic reform, and then cut the corruption and use the money to develop the agricultural section and then doing other things.
So again, return it from a basket case to the bread basket of the continent. Zulu, you know, some will look at this and say, well, once the celebrations die down, the reality is going to hit. This is ZANU-PF reorganization. Is there any way you can see perhaps a government that will bring in everybody else? Can we see a change in ZANU-PF in the way it moves forward?
It's going to be problematic because even if you read what the army generals were saying when they moved to remove Mr. Mugabe from power, they said they were not happy that they were not being accommodated in ZANU-PF. So, you know, people might celebrate today, but this Mugabeism in ZANU-PF, I think, will continue for a number of years. So I think it's too early to celebrate. I think the international community has to continue to push for serious reforms in Zimbabwe. Otherwise, Mnangagwa has been with Mugabe since 1976. At one time, he was his personal bodyguard. He sees Mugabe as his father, according to him. So for him to suddenly change, it's going to be difficult.
I mean, people want really looking forward to that transition from Mugabe to Mnangagwa. The hope was that there would be something different and fresh. So in so many ways, it's about the same thing, only a different person at the head.
I think it's more of the same. And also, you know, Zimbabwe's population, the youth constitute about 60% of the population. Mr. Mnangagwa is 75. Mr. Mugabe was 93. So I don't know, maybe it's time that you look at the youth for leadership.
Yeah, maybe G40 again. Right?
Indeed.
But Nike, in terms of the U.S. And its foreign aid to Zimbabwe, you know, we'll talk about that perhaps a little more another time. Kind of run out of time right now. But, you know, so many things happening, so many developments in the coming days. I want to thank both of you for joining us today, Blessing and Nike. Well, that's Nike Ching, his VOA State Department correspondent, and Blessing Zulu is a VOA Zimbabwe reporter. Now going all the way to West Africa, suicide bombing shattered the calm early Tuesday at a mosque in northeastern Nigeria, killing at least 50 people. The attack happened as people arrived for morning prayers at the mosque in the town of Mubi, located in Adamawa State. There has been no claim of responsibility, but the bombing resembles numerous prior suicide attacks carried out by members of the Boko Haram terrorist group. Now, a Nigerian police spokesman tells the Associated Press news agency the bomber was a teenager who triggered his explosives while mingling among the worshippers. Boko Haram has killed more than 20,000 people during its 8-year insurgency against the Nigerian government in a bid to create a strict Islamic state in the majority Muslim north. Now, the administration of U.S. President Donald Trump is considering whether or not to allow imports of some African elephant hunting trophies into the United States. Initial reports that the administration might lift an existing ban on these imports sparked widespread outrage. But now it appears that the administration is reconsidering that decision. VOA's Elizabeth Shanif has more.
For now, American sport hunters overseas cannot bring their African elephant trophies back into the United States. The topic made news last week after the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service posted this statement, appearing to lift the current ban on elephant trophy imports from Zimbabwe and Zambia. After widespread backlash, the president and his Interior Secretary took to Twitter, saying they needed more time to review conservation facts before making a policy decision. The practice of trophy hunting sparked global controversy in 2015 after an American doctor killed the renowned Cecil the lion, raising tough questions for hunting advocates and conservationists alike.
There is an argument from many people that hunting can bring revenues to poor people and communities living in Africa. And at the same time, it's assumed then that the enforcement mechanisms are in place to ensure that this is done properly. What we've seen, for example, with the shooting of Cecil, is that the systems don't actually work very well.
Ethical issues of big game hunting are the focus of a recent documentary titled Trophy. It examines how the hunting industry is financing the breeding of endangered species by exploiting a small percentage for the thrill of the kill while conserving the rest, according to filmmaker Shaul Schwartz.
That's kind of the idea of utilizing animals in this if it pays, it stays way. Now, is that the answer? I don't know. I'm here to raise questions, but I think what we should do in this subject is be less quick to judge and scream.
Chris Moore, an anti-poaching activist from Zimbabwe, says big game hunting can offer local African communities meat and money.
Half of that trophy fee goes back in to building a clinic or school or whatever the community decides. They have committees and a trust which organizes where that goes.
But animal rights groups are not convinced that the costs outweigh the benefits.
Ironically, the most revenue that these areas would earn is if the animals were alive. They earn drastically more money from tourism, particularly ecotourism, from people who want to see these animals alive and in the wild.
Trump administration officials say a decision on elephant trophy hunting policy will be issued in the coming weeks. Elizabeth Cherneff, VOA News, Washington.
Well, I want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we cover. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. We're also streaming our show live on Facebook, so check us out and share our show with your friends. Find me on Twitter at VOA Vince Makori. Well, coming up, combating diarrheal disease on the continent. Stay with us.
I'm Jeff Selden, and I work the National Security Beat. National Security Beat is anything that affects the national security of the United States, from counterterrorism to surveillance to even relations with Russia. It's one of the most fascinating beats you can have. It's probably one of the more important beats that you can cover because it touches on so many areas of the world, so many areas of people's day-to-day lives. I'm Jeff Selden, and my beat is national security.
Well, it's time for our health report, and joining us now is Africa 54 health correspondent Lino Mudu with an update on the global sanitation crisis. Hello, Lino.
Hello, Vincent. The world just marked World Toilet Day on November 19, an annual landmark highlighting the global sanitation crisis. Researchers at the University of Bath in Britain are testing fake fecal sludge to help safely dispose of raw sewage. The researchers developed the sludge using a recipe originally created by NASA to test in-space toilet technology and made some modifications. The fake material closely replicates the chemical and physical properties of fecal sludge. It consists of ingredients such as brewer's yeast, miso paste, and peanut oil. The researchers hope to provide best practice guidelines to help communities develop their own solar-based fecal sludge treatment technologies. Naomi Deering is the lead researcher.
We hope that by saying that we can replicate the drying process in a drying bed with fake fecal sludge, we can then take different moisture contents of this fecal sludge, and we can take different temperature and relative humidity conditions and say that if this is the moisture content of your fecal sludge, so if it's entirely liquid and you have this relative humidity, this temperature, then this is how long it's going to take in the drying beds before you can remove it, and then you compost it, and then you just use it as a soil conditioner in agriculture, or you just bury it in a pit and it is safe.
Worldwide, 2.3 billion people do not have access to a flushing toilet and use pit latrines or other rudimentary measures to dispose of their waste. Health experts say the effects are considerable, including the spread of diseases like cholera. Now, diarrheal disease causes more illnesses than any other ailment, and according to a new report, it's the second leading killer of children younger than 5. The document entitled Defeat Diarrheal Disease Initiatives says children who survive an episode but experience repeated infections are more likely to suffer from lifelong cognitive and physical impairments. Published by the organization PATH, the new State of the Field report on diarrhea reveals some good news. Childhood diarrhea deaths have decreased by nearly 50% between 2006 and 2016. However, children are still getting sick, and infections are a major problem. In 2016, there were over 1 billion cases of diarrhea in young children. And joining us in the studio for more on the subject is Eileen Quinn, Director of Advocacy and Communications with the Center for Vaccine Innovation and Access at PATH. Ms. Quinn, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having us.
So let's start with the good news, reduction in diarrheal diseases. To what do we attribute this?
Well, first of all, I think it means that when governments spend money on improving public health, the children win. So we've invested in better access to clean water, better sanitation, ORS and zinc, which treat diarrhea, and vaccines. And the combination of that, along with nutrition, has helped bring down deaths from diarrhea.
So what other findings were perhaps unexpected or surprising in the report?
Well, as you pointed out, the really serious problem now is that children are having recurring infection from diarrhea. A child under 5 may be sick many times a year. Each time, their stomach lining is deteriorated, and then a child isn't able to absorb the nutrients that they need. Then the brains and bodies of those children don't develop as they should. And so really, their childhood diarrhea limits the rest of their lives.
And some of the avoidable causes, we talked about water and sanitation. Can you tell us a little more about it?
Well, we definitely need to improve access to safe drinking water and sanitation across the continent of Africa. And I think governments are trying, and what we need is more support from the global community for national governments who recognize this problem for their children.
So if we are looking at some cost-effective solutions that could be implemented in developing countries where resources are scarce and solutions are challenging to come by, what would you say could be some very basic cost-effective solutions?
So there's a lot of great new work that's been done on point of use or point of community water filtration. Really excellent work that's being done on sort of sanitation entrepreneurs who are finding ways to address community waste. And actually, vaccines are the most cost-effective health intervention that a government can provide to their children. So a combination of integration, water, sanitation, vaccines, nutrition, that will do it.
So in terms of advocacy, when we approach governments, how do we frame the message to ensure that water sanitation is really one of the priorities on the agenda with regards to financing?
Well, I think the issue is that the children, their families, and their communities are stuck in a cycle of poverty unless we make these investments. So these investments are really for the future economic prosperity of a community and of a country.
So moving forward, when we look at the Sustainable Development Goals, I mean, diarrhea and waterborne diseases are definitely part of the big solution, you know, when we look at the health. Now, when we move forward What are some of the priorities areas that will be key in ensuring sustainable sanitation solutions?
Well, I think a financing mechanism is really important so that governments can think about the best way to make this happen over the long term. And as I said earlier, some private sector solutions and community-based entrepreneur sanitation solutions have a lot of promise in addition to governments thinking about how they can provide better access for their populations.
And quickly, what do you hope to accomplish after this report is released?
That no child should die of diarrhea and that no child should suffer lifelong effects from diarrhea.
Eileen Quinn, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And that was Eileen Quinn. She is Director of Advocacy and Communications with the Center for Vaccine Innovation and Access at PATH. And that's our health report for today. To stay in touch, find me on Twitter at Lenore Moudou. Back to you, Vincent.
Well, thank you very much, Lenore. Now be sure to watch Lenore Moudou's health reports every Tuesday and Thursday right here on Africa 54. Well, it's time now for a short break. Still to come on Africa 54. Forbes magazine reveals the highest paid woman in music. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Africa 54, and here's what's trending. All hail Queen Bee. Now, Forbes magazine's 2017 list for the highest paid women in music reveals that Beyoncé leads the way with an eye-popping $105 million pre-tax. She's the only person on the list to hit the 9 figures milestone. Adele, earning roughly 2/3 of Beyoncé's total, comes in second place with $69 million. Now, Taylor Swift, Celine Dion, and Jennifer Lopez ranked 3rd, 4th, and 5th, respectively. Good morning. Well, next up, scientists at the King's College London are helping to research a new approach to psychotherapy, assessing and treating people using virtual reality. These students are being led through a VR school canteen in which other children behave neutrally. But the way in which the students interpret the behavior is a predictor for conditions such as anxiety and depression. The virtual reality being tested at King's College London also includes a simulation set on a bus and another in a pub, 2 common trigger points for people with anxiety. Well, and finally, a new smartwatch health monitor uses artificial intelligence to constantly analyze the health of its wearer and promises an early warning system for medical emergencies. Called the Map Health Watch, the device has 5 sensors continually measuring 6 vital parameters. The data is transferred to the system servers by phone, where it is processed using rule-based and machine learning algorithm, diagnosing and identifying dangerous situations and identifying potential health risks as they arise. And that is what is trending today. Now, a top Ugandan musician turned legislator says he wants to use his star power to jumpstart political change in a country where President Yoweri Museveni has held the top office for 31 years. Africa 54's Esther Ewald reports.
Robert Changulanyi Sentamu, who is known to his music fans as Bobby Wine, has become a notable presence on Uganda's political scene after a surprise entry into politics with a landslide win in a parliamentary by-election at the end of June. His anti-government stance, peppered in his lyrics and an electric connection with his youthful music fans, has caused unease among some who say the combination could be turned into a potent weapon to quash Museveni's grip on power.
Uganda.
Uganda's legislators are deeply divided between those who support President Yoweri Museveni's bid to extend his rule and those who oppose the move. A recent bill introduced to decide on the matter turned Parliament into a fighting ring. Uganda's constitution forbids anyone older than 75 to run for president, which effectively prevents Museveni, 73, from running for re-election in 2021.
When people get involved, there will be change. You know that, I know that. So this mass awareness is not for us to go to a certain show. It is not for us to, you know, to go and do anything else other than change our lives. And if we want to change our lives, then we need to change the leadership.
Sentamu won wide acclaim when he visited Uganda's popular opposition figure Kizza Besigye and played guitar at his home in the capital Kampala, where he was under house arrest in the weeks after the last election. He says his music remains an effective voice to Ugandans, and he plans to continue using it even as a legislator.
The government wants to always uses the Public Order Management Bill to curtail the activities of the opposition. You understand? That's why the same thing has been happening. This one, even when Besigye is walking peacefully, they'll grab him and they'll fight. I'm not going to play into their tricks.
The popular Ugandan artist cum legislator refers to himself as a ghetto president and describes his music genre as edutainment. He has traded his rugged frizzy curly hair and denim for a clean cut and a suit for his parliamentary look. He began his music career in early 2000 and his songs often spotlight urban poverty. Some Ugandans are however skeptical that artists like Bobi Wine and others will not change their political stance as they pocket more money in parliament.
Politics has been commercialized. They get a lot of money, a number of deals and so on. You find that even people who don't suit to be parliamentarians find their way into parliament.
Sentamu maintains he will stay true to himself and champion the rights of the poor and politically oppressed Ugandans.
That kind of stereotype that has developed over time made people think that I'm turning around. I'm not turning around, I'm just growing into responsibility and seeing that if we want to change anything, we have to be involved, and I want to live by example.
Uganda's popular musicians have either steered clear of politics or openly lent their talent to the ruling party, which pays them to sing pro-Museveni praises or perform at his political rallies. But Sentamu's star power and charity work among the urban poor, especially in the slum neighborhood of the capital Kampala, continues to rise. With a sure cash flow as a legislator, only time will tell if Bobi Wine will change his tune. Esther Githui-Ewart, VOA News, Washington.
And that's it for today. Have a good night.
Welcome to English in a Minute. Going off the deep end sounds dangerous.
Off the deep end.
I wonder if Jonathan and Anna will need special equipment to explain this expression.
I heard that John got kicked out of a restaurant last night. What happened?
It was crazy. So we were eating dinner, and I just asked him about his new job.